Janine, we good? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the City of Binghamton City Council Work Session, 27th of February, 2023, 6 p.m. City Council Chambers. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Clerk will call the roll. Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Rossetti. Present. Councilwoman Riley. Councilmember Friedman.
Present.
Councilman Burns is absent. Councilman Strawn.
Present.
Councilman Scanlon.
Present.
And President Scrungy.
Present.
That's 6 here, 1 absent. Burns.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That being said, let's jump right in. At this time, I'll ask DPW Commissioner Dan Merkel for a discussion on RL 23-44 to amend the general fund for salt and sand.
Hi, everybody. Obviously, Danny's not here. I'm filling in today. My name is Josh Paludi. I'm filling in as the first deputy right now.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Floor is yours, sir.
Our RL is to move some funds for salt and sand. Last year, we went over budget by 115. And we're going to take that from the overtime from last year to cover it.
Thank you, Josh. Colleagues, any discussion? Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you, President Scrungy. Hello, Josh. I didn't catch your last name.
My name is Joshua Paludi.
Okay. Thanks for being here. So, every time the salt and sand comes up, I feel like we ask, is this the last? Will this cover it? And the answer is always yes. And then there's always more RLs requesting more money for salt and sand. So can you just help us understand what's going on here, why this additional request is coming in?
This is just a little bit that was left over from 2022 to close the books. So this is the end of it. It closes out 2022 for the sand and salt.
Do you pinky promise me that this is the last?
I pinky promise you this will be the end of it.
Okay.
For 2022.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Josh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. At this time, I will ask Executive Assistant to the Mayor, Megan Hyben, to come and speak on behalf of Dr. Burling for RL 23-46, an RL to amend the City of Binghamton historic guidelines as it relates to signage. Good evening, Megan. How are you? Good. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm presenting this tonight for the planning department. Julia and Tito each had family issues. So, okay, RL 23-46. This is to update the city's historic design guidelines as they relate to internally lit signs. It's basically an update to the language to give Claude the flexibility to decide these things on a case-by-case basis. And on the second page, right after the RL, it goes into detail on what that language update would be.
Thank you, Megan. Council, any discussion? Councilwoman Friedman.
Thank you, President Scrungy. Hi, Megan. How are
Hi,
you?
Councilmember, good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Can you give us an example of a case when this type of change would have been useful?
Sure. So this was actually sparked by the signage at the restaurant that's going into the train station, actually in your district, council member. The planning department, it's my understanding, reached out to SHPO for guidance on that. And the sentiment was that that's a sign that could have and should have probably been approved. It fit within most historic guidelines. But we had this barrier within the language that Claude uses to review. So this is an update kind of based on that guidance from SHPO.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, the sign that did the sign is on the restaurant right now?
That's correct.
Okay. And so this was a sign that maybe ought to have been approved, but wasn't, and therefore is maybe not consistent with the character of a historic building. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's a sign that should have gone to COD for approval, and my understanding is that it will be going before COD.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion? Councilwoman Riley?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. So I know they're only providing some amendments in terms of generally appropriate and adding some guidance, but without detail, there's a lot of subjectivity that would potentially put the city at risk. For example, say they want a 6 foot by 6 foot sign. Is that something that needs to be specified since we are amending what will be acceptable based upon the COD? The
So
people appointed on the COD at that time.
it's my understanding, and hopefully someone in the audience can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is updating just a very specific portion of the guidelines. So it's specifically as they relate to internally lit signs.
Okay.
But there are whole other frameworks that relate.
Is in a different provision in COD, recommended on the size of signs. I'm a ex officio member of the COD board, so.
I told Pat that I might be phoning a friend.
Out on the mic. So that's appreciated because again, when we see a portion of the language being amended without any other guidance as to what else is in there, it again is beholden upon us to ensure we decrease any subjectivity because the business owners will then hold us accountable if one sign passes and the other doesn't because we're changing the terminology and giving complete autonomy to one board that changes over time. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, thank you very much. This time I'll ask our head of purchasing, Ms. Bernice Griffiths, to. Yes, Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Riley.
I forgot. Now, typically, the business owner would have been alerted to needing the sign reviewed prior to paying for and affixing it to their building.
I'm not sure how that process works. That he should. COD approval is necessary for a sign like that.
Okay, and that goes in part of the permitting. So this person is out of order, honestly.
Currently, yes.
Okay.
So the sign went before COD. They realized that, well, the sign is appropriate for the historic district. Our language was outdated. In between, they went and installed the sign anyways,
Oh,
but it is going to be coming back to COD now that it is updated.
so is there a penalty for going forward before we amend our language to fit their need?
Did not know.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? This time I'll ask our head of purchasing, Ms. Bernice Griffiths, to join us for RL 23-47, additional services at Marabatos Stadium. Evening, Bernice. How are you? Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
So this is an RL for additional architectural and engineering services needed for the Phase 2 PDL project at Marabatos Stadium. This is with Chanis and Anderson.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Skirnji. Hi, Bernice. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Okay, so I have a couple of questions on this.
Sure.
The first one is that the third to last item involves O Sports, and my understanding is that our potential contract with them was pulled,
Right.
right? And so does that need to be amended in any way?
That's going to go through Chanis and Anderson.
Okay, so just cross up the O Sports.
Right.
Okay, so they're just not involved. Okay, there are some items on this list with substantial increases.
Mhm.
such as well, there are two weight room addition expansion lines on here, one of which is quite substantially increased. And the other one, the flood drainage mitigation plan, I mean, I understand that's expensive, but could you explain why some of these were not accurately
So these,
estimated?
yeah, so these changes came down from Major League Baseball after the initial contract. So these are all changes in scope that were required from the New York Mets to do. And the field drainage, that's an ongoing issue. There's several different areas that need to be addressed as part of the problems that they're having over there with the water.
Okay, so that makes sense that these requests are coming down from MLB. Could you clarify the process that usually takes in terms of, they give us a list of requirements and then did we fail to meet those requirements? The requirements changed after we agreed to
That's
allocate
correct.
funds?
They
Okay.
changed afterwards. So the club and Major League Baseball meet about once a week. And then any of those changes that come through as part of this project that they say you're not required to do, they'll come through the club, the project manager in the city.
Interesting. And so is there any, as far as you're aware, is there any predictability in terms of like how many times they're gonna change the requirements, that it's gonna be like tens of thousands of dollars more than the original
think
estimate?
we're towards the end of the project now. It's supposed to be completed by opening day. So I don't think that there'll be much more, but that it just depends. I think this is probably pretty close to final.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, thank you, Bernice, very much. This time, I'd like to ask Megan Hyman, the Executive Assistant to the Mayor, to join us again for RL 23-52, RL to amend the 2023 RL 23-53, 52, sorry. Amend the 2023 general fund for salary adjustments. My apologies, Megan.
Okay, hello again. Okay, RL 2352. As President Scaringi stated, this is an ordinance to amend the 2023 general fund budget. If you recall from during the budget process, when we create the budget each year, we recognize that there will be a certain number of unfilled positions for periods of time during that budget year. We reflect that in the salary adjustment budget line that's referenced in this RL. So this is to transfer those unused salary funds from the unfilled positions to essentially make good on that $100,000 that we budget into the annual budget during the budget process.
Thank you, Megan. Any discussion? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scaringi. So Megan, that explanation makes sense to me, but I will say I'm surprised that there's exactly $100,000. Can you tell me how much was like sort of finagled to make it fit, or did there actually happen to be $100,000 in the lines?
So
that are
I think that
left
this is, it's essentially a housekeeping item at this time. So we're at the point now at this time of the year with all of these salaries that they've added up to $100,000. So that's when we would make this transfer, if that makes sense.
Okay, and this is for 2023?
It's the 2023 budget, yes.
Right, okay.
Yep, and so this would become effective March 18th. And you'll, and like the different vacancies. So
Right.
those are sort of what's moved to make that 100,000.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilwoman Riley.
Thank you, Council President. Hello again.
Hello.
So we definitely, similar to the question my fellow council member mentioned, there are three different rates for police officers. So are you saying, and we know we have more vacancies than what's presented here on this document. So for example, we have $10,000 for one line of police officer. So how are we which lines to pull from? Because, so two questions. The $10,000 is what level officer compared to the 9,000 and the 5,000? Or if they're all the same, how are we able to pull more? Because they all have the start dates from 1/1 to 3/10 are the same for the 10,000 and the 9,000. But if we look down at the 5,000, it's from February, it's 1 month.
So I'm not sure how each of these were selected, but essentially what I was trying to say to Councilmember Friedman is because it's a housekeeping item, like this is something that was done during the budget process last fall. Knowing that we would have a certain number of vacant positions, that $100,000 was budgeted in. So this
Okay.
is just sort of making
So we
good.
just cushioned it and now we're removing the cushion that was built in.
It's not a cushion. It reflects what we know will be vacant positions, if that makes sense.
Okay. But, and it's prorated based upon the position type.
So it's a $100,000 flat in
Okay.
that budget line that's on the RL, the salary adjustments. So these combined make up that 100,000.
So it's just arbitrarily divided amongst the vacant positions.
How they were selected, I don't know, each of
Okay.
these here, just that they total 100.
So someone one of our constituents could not look at this and say, one is the level 3 police officer that's unfilled compared to a first year officer unfilled based upon the rates that they see here. That's not necessarily correct or how they
Correct.
should have.
That's not
assumed.
outlined here.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you, Megan, very much.
Thank you.
Megan, are you filling in for Kent or?
No, so that RL from Kent, he asked to be held off, just removed from the agenda. He might revisit at the next work session.
Okay. So
That's RL 2353.
dash 53. Okay, I will remove that from the agenda at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. At this time, I'd ask Pat McGinnis, head of Parks Department, to join us. Good evening, Pat. How are you?
Good, how about you?
Good to see you. RL 23-45, modify the general fund and golf fund. Floor is yours, Pat.
Yep, 2345 is to close out the 22 golf fund. To move some money around for that to close out at the end of the year. The big reason why is we never got the bar and restaurant going as expected. The bar didn't open till very late in the season and the restaurant didn't open at all. So we're expecting to not see this next year, with that being 100% ready to go when the weather turns.
Thank you, Pat. Any discussion? Seeing none, RL 23-54, amend the 2023 parks budget. Pat, the floor is yours.
All right, 2354. This is the first of 3 that you're gonna see today, all related to title changes and salary changes based off of the new blue collar Teamster contract, which was signed after the budget process was completed. Otherwise, this would have all been done right there and then. And so the first one is we have 9 labor positions right now as part of the budget or part of the contract process. Agreed to change them to park technician positions. It's no change in salary on that, but it tailors the entry level parks maintenance position from a labor, which is kind of a general construction, general DPW work, to a parks and grounds specific title, which are, you can see that in the folder I left you with the job description. So that is the first one. That'd be effective 3/18/23. It wouldn't affect any of the people in the jobs. We're not taking anyone's job. It's a straight just title change for them.
Any questions on RLs 23-54, 55, and 56? Again, remember, they all follow the same rationale with respect to.
I can hit on 55 and 56.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you'd like to hit on them
Yeah.
all at once, because they all follow the same rationale.
Absolutely. So 55 is modify one vacant MEO position to a tree trimmer position and transfer funds necessary. This MEO position is one of two we currently have vacant. We have three MEOs, which is motor equipment operator. The job description doesn't really fit any of the work we do in the Parks Department. So as part of this, we are restructuring a bit, which you'll see on the next one. We're gonna have two tree crews running, which will help alleviate, which I'm sure you all hear. People always want their trees trimmed. So that will help us speed up that process. So this MEO would become a trimmer, and then we're using some of the money that's been sitting since this person retired to fund the difference in that salary. The last one, 2356, it will take two full-time labor positions, which we just talked about changing to park techs. Those are vacant. They become available in our budget on 4/1. That would take those two positions, and one of them would become a forester position. The next would become a crew leader. The urban forester will be heading up the two tree crews that will be running, working on tree work. And the crew leader will be running the newly created positions where we're taking care of the vacant owned properties and code violations that we're mowing. So they will be the effective leaders of those small crews. After that, or after these three, we're gonna fill these. Guys are gonna move around within our department, and I'll be coming back to do a couple more changes once these first title changes hit. At the end of the day, we're going from 28 workers to 28 workers. It creates it gets rid of two of the entry level positions and creates two more titles. So it will, give our own in-house guys a chance to move up.
Thank you, Pat. Any discussion?
It's kind of like a chessboard right now, but
Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scaringi. Sorry, I was trying to formulate my
That's okay.
question in my head before I raised my hand.
That's okay.
So, again, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly because it's confusing.
yes.
So the MEO positions are being defunded in their entirety, is that correct?
Correct, but they are being refunded. The first one that you're seeing today is being refunded as a tree trimmer. The next vacant MEO position, which you're not going to see at this session, you'll see it once some of these ones we're doing today are filled. That vacant MEO will become a groundskeeper position, which is same as we're doing with the park tech to labor. It's the same rate, but it's a parks and grounds background and experience versus a public works background and experience.
Okay, so, and you said that's not yet available to us.
That will become available once we get these positions sorted out and moved along. As we're expecting to fill internally, I can't post the positions till the internal ones open up for me.
Right, okay, understood. So I noticed in RL 56, the part of the MEO salary is being used to fund the new positions, right? Urban forester and crew leader.
Yes,
Okay.
since they're vacant, knowing all these changes were coming, I didn't hire those guys immediately so we could get these changes done. So what have been vacant positions sitting, we use the money for going forward.
Okay, and so then the rest of the funding are just budget lines that have some extra in
Yep.
order to raise the hourly rate of the urban forester and the crew leader from what it was as laborer.
Yes, and those are
Okay.
all currently vacant positions, so they're using the money that hasn't been spent on the salary to fund these salaries for upcoming.
Okay, and so with the exception of the MEO position, are you still trying to fill the other positions, like the animal control officer, for example? First deputy DPW commissioner?
So those aren't parks positions.
Okay.
But I believe they are still trying to fill them, as they're using money up till 3/3, which is next week, so. Obviously they haven't onboarded anyone yet, but they are still trying to fill those.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Riley.
Thank you, Council President Scaringi. Hello again, Pat. How are you?
Good, how are you?
I know we tried to kind of clear some of this up before the meeting. And thank you again to Councilman Member Friedman for asking half of my questions. However, if we look at the crew leader and urban forester positions, with the salary increases, this is not enough to cover them for the year, correct? Because it does say one at 56 and one at 52. So where will the remaining funds come from?
The remaining funds won't be needed because they won't have effective start dates until for April 3rd, 2023.
If we're able to find them.
Yes.
Okay.
If this is approved, that would be what the difference is in the listed sale versus what we're asking to transfer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Pat, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
This time I will ask from the mayor's office, Sarah Close, to join us for RL 23-50. That is the wrong one. Economic development. Might be nice if I can read. For
Hello.
economic development. Sarah, thank you again.
I'll work wherever you tell me to, Gio.
No. That's strike two on me tonight. My apologies.
No
Floor is
problem.
yours, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
No problem. This is RL 2357. So a few weeks ago, you approved an ordinance to approve the purchase of 72 Port Street back to the city from Vision 72 LLC. At that time, we did not put the where the money was actually coming from in that RL. This is just correcting that, adding the funding line that the money will actually come from. We're requesting to expedite this because they're looking to close this Friday. The city would get site control of that parcel back. We just have to have time to cut the check with this new funding line.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Any discussion? Seeing none. Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. I stumbled on my words because I was trying to say Sarah's from Economic Development, Mayor. Sorry. That being said, I will ask Billy Goodson from the Binghamton Johnson City Sewage Treatment Plant to join us for four respective RLs. Billy, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. Billy, before you start, two of these RLs, I believe, from what I'm reading, are reflective of 2022
Yes, the
budget.
first two are for 2022.
It's so they're okay. So colleagues, for everyone on council, please be cognizant that RLs 23-48 and 49 have been requested to be expedited because they are related to the 2022 budget. So because of closeout purposes, I'm going to allow that. So Billy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first one is for an increase to the water line to pay the city of Binghamton water bill that we received in January to cover. We just finished negotiating with Vestal, and this was the money that was still owed to Binghamton, which put us over budget for this year. So requesting $3,568.67 for the water line to be taken from the contingency line.
Thank you. Colleagues, any discussion? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scaringi. Hi, Billy. How are
Hi.
you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So when you say that we finished negotiating with Vestal, is that for the future as well, or is that only retroactive for 2022?
Going forward, we'll be paying Vestal instead of City of Binghamton.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is that this was over budget because we hadn't finished the negotiations, but looking forward, we have a contract in place, and so we probably won't see
No, we won't
these.
see
Okay,
anymore.
all right, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? RL 23-49, amend the sewage treatment plant budget for excess budget.
Okay.
Floor is yours, Bill.
Chuck Shager, Comptroller, Fiscal Officer for the treatment plant. Let me know that we were over budget on the reimbursed village local systems cost line, and requested that it be taken from the reimbursed village debt services payment line in the amount of $117,745.38.
Thank you, Billy. Any discussion? Seeing none. RL 23-50, amend the sewage treatment budget for lump sum payments. Billy, oh, my apologies,
I'm sorry.
Councilwoman. No, you're okay. Councilwoman.
I was
Rubin,
again
please.
delayed processing my question in my head.
Take your time.
So to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, this means that we are essentially receiving 117,000, or we need to take that away, or sorry, I'm processing out loud,
Okay.
but so we were over budget in estimating the amount that we would get reimbursed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this is a budget decrease of 117,000, right? We need to find that money from the budget line.
It's being taken from the reimbursed village debt service payments line
Okay,
and put on the reimbursed village local systems cost line.
okay. So these are both budget lines having to do with reimbursement, and we're just shuffling
Yes.
around the.
Yeah, so we're just trying to clean up the budgets for all the lines in 2022, and this one was one of them.
Okay, so it's all reimbursement. It's just going to the wrong, it currently is budgeted to the wrong place. And so we're moving it to the correct budget line.
But I believe it's an expense and
Okay.
revenue. So we're moving them back and forth. Like, we had the money on the one line, we're moving it over to the other one.
I see. Okay.
Chuck Shager would probably have a better answer for you than me. 'cause
Okay.
He handles
No,
these
again,
things.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding where the
Okay.
money is going.
Okay.
The double reimbursement lines was what tripped me up
Yeah.
there. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilwoman Rowland.
You, again, Council President, how are you, Ms.
Good.
Goodson?
I'm good.
Mine is not really related to this, but I don't know if you recall, your name was brought up in a meeting a time or two about the DPW and audit and the like. Do you remember, did you hear?
Is this, what's it?
Well,
relate-
they were saying you were responsible for the parts area
Yeah, for
prior
central
to.
garage.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so, and I can always I'm letting you know that I have some questions.
Okay.
And if you're not able to answer them tonight, that's fine, but you left before
Yes.
they pulled up your name as Billy was the one there
Yes.
most of the years.
Yes.
And so during your tenure,
Mhm.
did you audit the parts warehouse, the parts department annually? Or do you recall doing so?
When I moved into the purchasing position,
If I may, Councilwoman Riley,
Uh-huh.
and I appreciate the question. Can we
Take
we
it.
just keep, can we just keep the discussion germane to the RLs at question
Okay.
right now and then circle back to that, if that's okay?
okay,
Just to get that out of the way.
Okay.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other discussion as it relates to RL 23-49? Anything at all? Again, just general reminder, -48 and -49 for 2022 budget purposes will be expedited. Debt twenty-three 50, and then the budget for lump sum payouts. Billy, the floor is yours.
Okay, as part of the CSCA contract, employees who are members of the CSCA, hourly employees, negotiated a 2.5% increase into, for their salary. And there's also, a CPI increase for anything above the 2.5%. We didn't receive the CPI final numbers until mid-January. So we have to do a lump sum payment for 2022 in the amount of $11,127. Which will be taken out from of contingency and put towards hourly at state retirement and social security. The increase was a 0.57% increase.
Thank you, Billy. Council, any discussion? Seeing none, move on to twenty-three 51, amend the sewage treatment budget for salary adjustments. Billy, the floor is yours.
This is also related to the CPI increase. When we did the budget, it was at 2.5%. So we're requesting the increase of the 0.57% for the
Those two, I think, are just companion
Yeah,
legislation to each
yes,
other.
they are.
Yeah. Okay. Any discussion as it relates to twenty-three 51? Anything at all? Billy, do you mind fielding a quick question or
no. not
two
at
on
all.
that? Councilwoman Riley, go ahead.
Again, for that, I forgot about those two pieces of legislation. I thought we were letting Billy go again. I can't let you go ever now, now that we see you have so much information. But yes, I'm sure you heard that you were brought up, and
Yes.
so can you share any information about that process and what was done during your tenure?
When I started in the purchasing department, I requested a part-time employee to come in and audit the inventory and get it so that it was what was in our inventory reflected what was in what's called cartograph. There were some discrepancies.
And just how far back your tenure, how far back were you in this role?
About 2.5 years ago.
Oh, 2.5.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So there were issues 2.5 years ago.
when I started, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for clarifying.
You're
But you
welcome.
were a part of that annual audit, or the part-timer did that alone once?
Yes. She went in and actually did the counts of everything that was in the storeroom and
Oh.
compared it to what was in cartograph.
Okay. And she did that once during your tenure?
She did, but she maintained it afterwards. She's
Okay.
no longer with the central garage. That position was eliminated.
Okay. Thank you. And
You're
thank you
welcome.
for answering.
Sure. Is that it?
Thank you, Billy.
You're welcome.
Council, does anyone have a paper RL for twenty-three 46? Anybody have that on hand? Okay, I didn't think so. Just want to double check. Okay, so let's move forward with the agenda. So if you will kindly turn to the last 2 pages of your packet, coming on to the very last 2 pages with some of the points that I had mentioned at the last business meeting. So I'd like to present you all with the template of the new RL form. So the reality of it is we've ended up, forgive me, in a situation for a number of years where quite honestly, any number of variables that extend from attachments to an RL are not received, an insufficient amount of information is not received as it relates to a particular RL, nothing malicious, but just lost through, if you will, the operational process. So the goal here is to attempt to centralize on one form all of the relevant and pertinent information that we need in order to review requests for legislation. Some examples would be more specifically pointing out not just proposed titles, but who the presenter will be, streamlining the signature process, particularly when there are budget transfers that occur, whether it's the city receiving a new grant or we move or transfer N dollars from budget line X to budget line Y. We often tend to get into situations where a lot of that information can get lost. And so by centralizing this and getting it all into one form, it will allow us to be able to get our agendas out more efficiently. Everything okay? No, you're okay. No, you're fine. Yeah. Yeah, two of the titles on the last one, they're very similar to each other. Yeah.
I
So
thought it was a duplicate. That's why I was.
by noon tomorrow, you will have electronic copies of this in all of your email inboxes. But what I wanted to do was give you a heads up that, again, I had a good conversation with Mayor Cram about this, working with both our clerk and deputy clerk to make sure we're streamlining the process for them, because they really do. They really go above and beyond as it relates to getting these agendas ready for us. I think one of the major issues is again, it's not finger pointing, but I think sometimes we just get in a situation where it can be very easily forgotten that the clerk's office, for all intents and purposes, is really an aggregator of information, at least as it relates to agendas more than anything else. So if we can streamline that, it allows that to move more efficiently in their office, which means getting the agenda to us earlier, which also means it's time as a function of time, it's more available for public consumption, which I think we all agree is a good idea. So I wanted to present this to all of you and offer you the opportunity for any input. I do recognize you may want to take some time and look at this, especially with an electronic copy that, again, you will get tomorrow in PDF form. But again, I wanted to be transparent. I wanted to be open and upfront and progressive and get this final-ish draft to you to let you know that, again, working with multiple agencies and departments within City Hall, listening to all of you and taking in your input. Any questions, comments, concern, discussion? Councilman Riley.
What is the timeline by which you want feedback on this document?
I would say within a week. To be very blunt, I'd actually like to go live with this by beginning of March. Beginning of March, next meeting. Sorry, tomorrow's March 1st.
Wednesday.
Yeah, 2 days. It's been a little bit of a busy day. Sorry.
So just for my clarification.
Please.
Why is the signature necessary on this document? Why was that added?
So Corp Counsel can add a little bit to this as well. So they're from it's a technicality, and I guess the best way I can answer that question is by illustrating it with an example. So generally speaking, legislative bodies work through a committee structure, right? So we have 6 standing committees. Anything ad hoc that we might create And then anything that might be salient to something that we appoint, whether it be BLTC, traffic board, anything like that. Due to, generally speaking, and this is very common amongst municipalities, due to the size of our body, we generally tend to operate with what in legislative government is referred to as a committee of the whole. So the signatures, and again, Corp Council can add anything that might be legally there as it relates to the city charter and stuff like that. But in part, the mayor's signature, the comptroller signature, and the Corp Council's corporation council signature is there to kind of move things along. Comptroller particularly because most things have some.
Not at the bottom, because we've had those all the time. It now has a.
Oh, you're
signature
talking about at the
top.
top. My
Right.
apologies.
Anything we've had before, I'm not gonna question.
Yeah, no, go
I'm
ahead.
questioning revisions and why.
No,
So
no,
that
please.
signature at the top is what I'm inquiring.
Yeah, no, that's just literally a print name signature, nothing else.
It's print name at the top, then a signature line. So you're not asking for a wet signature.
Ideally, I'm just gonna share this. Ideally, I want to move this completely 100% electronic. That's ideally what I want. My goal is, in working with all my colleagues, is to institutionalize that process by the end of the year.
So there is no legal precedent or a need for a signature because we've not had a signature by the author.
In the
Before-
past, right?
Right.
Yeah. So there's two things with that. Number one is, again, just the traditional kind of dynamic of just print name signature, but also I want to make sure that, because another issue that we've come up with from an operational perspective is that we operate on the assumption that when we receive the agenda, person A is presenting and then something happens. And sometimes that moves to person B and can be at the last minute. So I want to make sure all of that stuff gets solidified.
So then the author of the RL can be different from the applicant presenting RL. So then we would need two different areas for then the authorship versus the presentation.
Sure, we could do that.
Okay.
In the
Again,
ev-
this
in
is,
the
this is
ev-
my first glance at this.
Yeah.
That is a significant change. And I know when we're submitting RLs, I've never needed my signature. But of course, the mayor comptroller for any
Yeah, on the
city,
bottom.
right, that's expected, although there may be some confusion as to the term administration that's now in that
Mhm.
header compared to city hall offices within, because administration is something different, but we can talk about that offline.
Sure.
But again, I wanted to, again, highlight this new header that talks about the presenter
Yep.
versus the author and the need for a signature.
Correct.
And there's
Yeah.
really nothing that requires such. You're just adding it.
Yeah, I just think it's transparency, accountability. That's it.
But if they're doing it in my absence, they would not have had time to sign it because it may have been an emergent change. So it's really what we care about is the signature of the author.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And again, once, hopefully, when we move things and get it electronic, that doesn't even become a problem at that point. But yes, a totally valid point taken.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you, President Scrungy. So this is me being particular,
Please.
but I have an aesthetic critique.
Aesthetics are important.
Some of the heading on the request for transfer sheet, some of the column headings are centered and some of them are left justified. And I think it would look better if all of them were one or the other.
Yeah, no, I see that. Yeah, budget. Yeah. So for example, on the left-hand side, budget line is center aligned, but on the right-hand side of the form, budget line title is left aligned.
Yes,
So, yeah,
same
center
thing with the bottom. So it
on the
looks
bottom.
like,
Yes, I see that. You're right.
yeah,
Absolutely. Center it up. Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else?
Back to the first page.
Please.
Seeker has an 8. It's typically SEQR, I believe.
Councilwoman, forgive me again. Can you say where you're looking at? I apologize.
Down towards, right above the office use only box,
Yes,
says seeker required. There's an A there. Are we amending all of our language to reflect this change?
This is the way a lawyer would spell it. It's SEQRA. It's the State Environmental Quality Review Act.
act.
So we're gonna see that moving forward on every document as opposed to what
You
we've
you
seen
don't have
typically.
to, but it's not improper for it to be there either. Either people will recognize SEQR or SEQRA. I've seen people use it both ways.
Right, but for consistency, since,
We can put A in most places if it.
okay,
Thank you.
thanks.
Anyone else? Seeing nothing, Madam Clerk, any pending legislation review, please?
All right, so we have 18 on the pending and then 4 that were expedited. And then we just have the public hearing for the zoning of the stadium district.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, any discussion or questions for the clerk's office as it relates to pending legislation? Anything at all? Going once, going twice? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion by Councilman Scanlon,